Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have Larry Kesslin. Larry recently celebrated his 22nd wedding anniversary to his wife, Ilise. They moved to San Diego from New York City in 2010 and are raising two young adults, their daughter Drew, who is currently a junior at Colorado State, and son Noah, who recently graduated high school. Larry and his family spent the first 6 months of 2015 traveling the globe while the children were homeschooled. On their global journey, they visited 12 countries, 25 different Rotary Clubs, and Larry was the keynote speaker at the Rotary District Governors Conference in Istanbul and met some of the most amazing people around the globe. As for business, Larry has been an entrepreneur for close to 30 years. He is a business development expert, speaker, and author who published his third book titled Success Redefined in 2015. Larry recently took over responsibility for managing and growing Spire, a community of purpose-driven leaders in University Town Center here in San Diego. Larry is extremely focused on making a difference in the world and using business as a vehicle to do that. He was the co-chair of the 2018 Cause Conference and one of the founding members of the Chamber of Purpose. Larry lives in Carlsbad and loves biking, playing volleyball, tennis, and pickleball, and he's on a mission to leave this planet better than he found it. So Larry, thank you so much for being on, man.
My pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful day in sunny San Diego. I'm sure there's a lot of people in early December somewhere else that are not as blessed as we happen to be here, but thank you for having me.
It's a mini paradise. Well, Larry, getting to know you and learning about you and what you're running, like you flip some questions, some traditional business questions on its head and a lot of traditional business thinking. So I want to ask you the first question that you flipped on its head when I first met you. And I think this will stem a really good conversation. Mm-hmm. And the question is, Larry, what do you do?
What do I do? So first of all, I'm a dad and I'm a husband and I happen to be an entrepreneur. So that's what I do.
No, and I love that. So when we first met, you always mentioned that you travel the world, and the one question that we ask in America isn't asked in the world. And I want to understand your perspective on business and how you are able to simplify things just by looking at things in a different perspective. So can you shed a little bit of light from your experience on those new perspectives that you have?
I've been on this journey. I just turned 57 in September. I've had some major events in my life happen, like living in New York City through 9/11. Spending time with inner city kids in my late 20s, early 30s, and realizing that there were so many people that were happier than I was. Mm-hmm. And many times they had so much less than I had. So it kind of got me thinking as to what is it produces happiness. Mm-hmm. And in 2010, I moved from New York to San Diego, which was one of my life's dreams. And I've been here over 10 years now. And in 2015, I flipped my life. I went from clients all across the country, living in an airplane 2 to 3 times a month and going to conferences and running events all over the US, to saying, I want to build my life in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things happened on the road to that, but one of them was a trip to Africa in 2012 that truly changed the trajectory of my life. I came back from that trip a different person. I had no idea if I were to look back at it in that moment, I had no idea that trip would trigger what it triggered. So I went bringing computers to rural villages in eastern and northern Uganda. So we ended up landing in Entebbe. We went to Kampala, and then we went to a town called Jinja, and then to Bali, and then to Gulu up in northern Uganda. Mm-hmm. And I met some of the nicest, kindest, happiest people you'd ever meet in your life. We were in in Bali in this little neighborhood and met all these people. It's the Jewish community in Eastern Uganda. There's like 1,500 Jews in Uganda, and 500 of them live around this area called the Abayudaya. And met this young man that we ended up adopting that now lives in San Francisco. It's a long story, but he wanted to become a commercial airline pilot. My wife and I kind of adopted him in that moment. And he's now married with a baby on the way due tomorrow. They're going to have their first child, and then he's moving back to Nairobi. Our investment was not for him to become an American, but to get the training he needed here to become a commercial pilot and a frame and engine inspector so he can go back to Africa and start his business, which he's doing in 2021.
Wow.
But that trip kind of introduced me to all these people that were like, I don't know. I did a TEDx talk in 2014, and I titled it "The Disconnected Connected World." And I said, the more technologically connected we become, the more emotionally and spiritually disconnected we become. And what I found in Africa, what I found in Africa were people that were deeply connected. They were connected to each other. They were connected to the land because they still farmed it. They were connected to their ancestors because they didn't have access to the internet. So there's no, I mean, everybody thinks that wisdom is found in Google, but wisdom is not in Google. Google's filled with lots of information and lots of data, but wisdom is curated, and the internet's far from curated. Old people have wisdom, yet in our culture, we put old people into retirement villages and have them spend time with each other. Makes no sense. And it made no sense to me. And when I got back, I went to a conference about 6 weeks later down in Mexico trying to solve world poverty. So I had a business. My business was doing well. I was helping a lot of people make a lot of money. And in return, I made some money, a good living for American standards, to live in San Diego and to do what I wanted to do, with a definition of success from my age of 28 on to the ability to do what I want whenever I wanted to do it. So at 48, when I went to Africa and I came back, I'm like, I could do whatever I want. I went to Africa for a month. My business was fine. And I get back and I'm like, there's something wrong. There's something missing. And the three questions I was asked when I went to that conference 6 weeks later, called Opportunity Collaboration in Mexico, it was 400 people trying to solve world poverty, was what is poverty? Who gets to define it? And why are we trying to fix it? And like my head exploded because I'm seeing, I met all these people that were poor based on our definition of poverty. Yet they were happier than most of the people I know. Their lives were simpler. They had less stress. They had something that we were missing. And people kept asking me after I got back, do you want to go back? I'm like, not really. I mean, I wouldn't trade places with them for anything in the world based on the hardships that they have in their life. But I want something that they had that we're missing. And over the last 8 years, it's come clear to me through the research that I did. So 2012, we take a month and go to Africa. And I was blessed enough in 2015 to pull my kids out of school for 6 months and take a trip around the world. And that 6 months, I actually walked away from my business. Everybody says, oh, you sold your business. No, I didn't sell it. I just said, I'm done. It was a consulting business. The business was me and my partner and a handful of resources. So the resources took all the clients. Clients were fine. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. I need to go find my reason for being and make it my work. Because think about it, I'm spending 50 weeks a year helping people make more money in the IT industry. So I could go spend 2 weeks of the year trying to change the world. And in I went to that conference 3 years in a row, 2012, 2013, 2014. And in 2014, before I walked away from my business, I said, I come to this conference once a year for a week. And I do work to change the world for a week. And I spend 50 weeks plus making money. I'm like, I should spend all my time trying to change the world and figure out a way to make money from that. So that's what the last 5+ years of my life have been. And I've come to the conclusion really clearly from all the research I did. When I traveled, I studied happiness and joy. I mean, I just tried to figure out what it is that makes people happy. And Martin Seligman and I mean, there's so many people out there that have written, Sean Aker from the Harvard study. And there's so much information out there, the Harvard study that's been going on for almost 90 years now of what drives happiness. And they can tell at the age of 50 whether somebody's going to be happy at the age of 80. And it comes down to one thing. And nobody knows about this stuff. And the one thing that drives happiness at 80 is the depth and quality of your relationships.
Yes.
So this whole story that I told you is like, boils it down to, I spent the last 10 years of my life out of 57 years. And I wrote a book back in 2015 it's called Success Redefined. Because my original definition was the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it. And that worked until it didn't work. And it stopped working when I was about 48, about 10 years ago, when I realized that doing whatever I want whenever I want to do it was not making me happy. It was giving me freedom, which is what I chose. I chose freedom at 29, left GE, started on my own, and I was chasing freedom, but I wasn't chasing fulfillment. And when I redesigned everything in 2015, I added a piece to my definition of success, which is the redefinition, is the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it while being part of something greater than myself. So joining Rotary and getting involved in giving back and being integrally involved in other people's lives for the sake of them versus the sake of me. Our society is taught to focus on us. And how that affects us in the business world is the difference. So everybody says, there's a bunch of people today that's saying capitalism is bad. Like capitalism is evil and capitalism is the problem. I 1000% disagree. Capitalism is a beautiful thing. Greed, that's bad. The problem is we've made greed and capitalism synonymous.
Or selfishness,
whatever you want to call it. So you make all this money and you have a business and you start a business. Let's use Jeff Bezos or Gates, two totally different ends of the spectrum. So Bezos is where Gates was 20 years ago. He's in the middle of his drive and he's creating all this wealth. To do what? Who needs $100 billion? To do what? In my belief system, he's a steward of that money to affect other people's lives. Yet that's not where he is in his life. He's still trying to build this thing where Gates has already gone to the other side and said, okay, I already built my wealth. Now I'm using it to affect the world. My understanding is they have to give away $180 million a day from the fortune that he has for the Gates Foundation. They have lots of ways. They have almost 2,000 employees. I mean, the art of changing the world is where we need to go. And I still believe too many people are focused on their own wealth accumulation and not on stewarding their wealth to actually affecting others. And I think that's the shift we're going through right now. And it all comes down to human connection. All of it is people that are connected to the stuff, the tangible, the cars, the trips, all that stuff. I see tend to be less genuinely fulfilled in their lives than those that are totally about being of service.
That's a huge perspective gap. And I just want to clear it for our listeners as well. Like, I completely agree that capitalism is not an issue. It's everything needs profit in order to drive forward, but it's how you use that profit. And like you mentioned, the simplicity of the human connection to your employees, the human connection to your vendors, the human connection to your customers, and having that relationship will be more impactful if you focus on impact. And I know it's like a cliche, focus on impact and then the profits will come. Well, if you really truly focus on giving and adding significant value to others, especially your customers, the profits not only will come, but you'll be able to compound that profit based on relationships, referrals. And so Larry, one of the things that I'm really curious about is you mentioned when you were focused on Spire, you helped growing a community here in San Diego, and you said that community is local. And one of the things that you were against was like having like international or national types of community members. And I want to get your perspective and pick your brain a little bit. What is your thoughts in regards to building true community, even if it's for a business networking or if it's for growing personally or if it's like hobbies or relationships?
I've been in the community business in my mind for 25 to 30 years. So I started my first peer group in 1996 on my birthday, September 10th. So what is that, 24 years ago. I started looking at peer groups and community and how they evolve and studying them. And to me, communities are sized. So anything more than 200, 225 people is no longer a community. You have a town or a city. So communities have a certain size to make them function really well. So the community members actually all know each other. And when I came to San Diego in 2010, I lived here, but I didn't live here. I was a resident, but I wasn't a participant in the community. So my business was all across the country. I got involved in some stuff with my kids and their kids' sports and all that type of stuff, but I didn't anchor myself in San Diego until I got back from my trip and started a business from scratch where I said my focus was going to be, so if you know San Diego at all, Camp Pendleton's just at the northern edge of Oceanside.
Mm-hmm.
The 15 is the highway that kind of runs through the eastern side of San Diego. There's this other country at our border called Mexico and Tijuana. And then there's an ocean. And in that little box is an island that I call my little place where I want to build my life. My life includes my work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I have my work life and then I have my personal life. I have my life. Everybody's looking at work-life balance. I don't believe in work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in having a life. And that's why when people ask me, what do I do? And it's funny, you ask me, what do I do? And I say, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, and I'm an entrepreneur. And they're like, people would ask me, but no, what do you actually do? And I'm like, well, I also play pickleball and I golf and I bike and I love playing tennis. And they look at me like I have two heads. Like, no, you're not answering my question. I said, I am answering your question. I said, you want an answer that makes you feel better. Like, I don't even know why you're asking me what I do. Is it a default question that's the only thing you know how to ask? Is it because you want to judge whether I'm a prospective client for you or not, whether I can help you make money or you can? Why do you want to know? Because when you go to Australia or you go anywhere in Europe, nobody cares. It's like a secondary thing in their life. They actually do stuff to make a living so they can enjoy their life.
They're not defined by their job role or description.
My biggest challenge, 2016, was brutal. I mean, imagine 20 years in the same business, identity attached to it, made a very good living, and I literally walked away. And my wife was like, I trust and support you. You're smart. You'll figure it out. I thought I made the biggest mistake in my life in 2016. And it was all around identity. My dark night of the soul was around my identity, Larry. I'm a spiritual being having this human experience, and I have a title, a label, all this stuff. And it's all tied into identity. I mean, you can let the identity go and just be a being that is here to be of service. The rest of it takes care of itself. But you need to really let go of that identity piece. I am just here to help others. And our system has provided a way to take care of those that take care of it. And in some ways, I truly believe I was gifted with certain skills that allow me in this moment in time to earn enough income based on the skills that I have. I'm on the sales business development side. If you can sell anything, if you have a skill set to create relationships, then you can make a living on our society. If you're a really good programmer and you have the ability to create code that solves problems, you can make a good living. If you're someone who is really good at making food today and you became a chef, you're in trouble unless you figure out some creative ways to get that food onto people's plates.
To market delivery, yep.
So there are certain places and certain people that have been given different gifts than others. And I just feel blessed every day that the areas I've chosen are ones that are still doing well during this pandemic. And I think community is critical during this pandemic. And I also do some work with an outsourced accounting firm. So outsourced services, I think, will be strong over the next 5 years, even grow tremendously. And I believe we're at a point in time where relationships are going to matter more than anything.
Correct. 100% agree with that. And I wanted to break it down in regards to, like, we're not just flipping things on its head. I think we're just looking at it through a different perspective. Like you mentioned, like, we have these skill sets, we have people that we can take care of. And also we're not defined by that job title or job role. So you don't have to create a lifestyle or an identity around that specific square in your life, because you're so much more in regards to what you do in the morning, what you do in the evening, who you hang out with, your family, friends, your hobbies, or in your spiritual self as well. So I think that's extremely important. And one of the things there that you mentioned earlier was that business development, new business, is a byproduct of relationships. So I want to dive a little bit into that.
Sure. So when I left and started out on my own, again, at 51, crazy. I look back at it now, I'm like, why did you even think that that was a good idea? But I'm living the life I was born to live versus the one I was taught. I mean, that's the process, I believe. I believe that when we're born until the time of maybe 20 years old, the world affects us in all different ways, our parents and everything else. And from the time of 20 until you die, you get to either be the person that the world taught you to be, or you get to figure out who you were born to be. And until about 50 years old, I was being the person that the world taught me to be. I mean, my process of shedding that skin started in my late 20s, but it took me another 25 plus years to kind of get out of that skin and say, okay, who am I? And in 2016, my brother sent me a job description as I was struggling through this shift from being the owner of a business who does everything. So when you start a business at 29 and at 49, 50, 51, you walk away from it. What did you actually do? So I had a bunch of clients. I serviced the clients. I hired other people to service the clients, somewhat, most of the time better than I did. What did I actually do? So in 2016, my brother sends me this job description from one of his friends from the music paradigm, which basically taught leadership development through an orchestra. He would use the orchestra as a metaphor.
That's cool.
And he was looking for a business development director. And he said, Larry, this describes you. And I'm like, okay. So I read the job description. I'm like, business development, that's cool. So I go interview with the guy. He's like, why do you want to work for me? You're an entrepreneur. You've written books. I can't hire you. I want someone who does what I tell them to do. I'm like, yeah, but I need a job right now. I need something. And I started researching business development and I couldn't find anything, nothing. Everything's about sales and marketing. And the thing called business development is like lost in the middle. So I actually found an entrepreneur recently who was able to define the difference between business development, sales, and marketing. So marketing is about touch points. Business development is the creation of warm leads. That's my belief of what business development is. And sales is taking an introduction and turning it into a client. So those are the three steps. So I started looking at business development saying, how does business development work? And I love processes and I love systems. So, and the name of the company that I created was called 5 Dots. The dots goes back to Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford in 2005, where he talks about connecting the dots. You can't connect them looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And you need to trust that everything's happening for a reason. So I started playing with these 5 dots and I started looking at how would I develop a methodology around 5 dots. So I said, everything starts with a relationship. So that's the first dot. So, and then I started talking to a marketing person. They're like, no, the first dot is not relationship. The first dot is your second dot, which is target market. It all starts with your target market. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think target market's important, but if there's no relationship, it doesn't matter who your target market is.
Yeah, exactly.
So my model starts with a relationship. Relationship development is number 1. Number 2 is target market. Who's your ideal client? So if you can clearly articulate, so for Spire, I'm looking for purpose-driven leaders that want experiences to deepen relationships with other purpose-driven leaders that are all rooted in service. That's my target market. I don't care whether you're the owner of a business. I don't care whether you're the business development director, VP of sales, CFO, CEO, whatever title you have, or whether you have a sole practitioner consulting business. If your values align with the values of the organization, I'd love to have you as a member. If you're in there to be of service to the rest of the community, then everybody's open. The vulnerability in the conversations is amazing. That's the target market. The third dot of this methodology is your story. And I don't love the idea of company stories. I like the idea of individual stories. So I'm working with a client now, and I'm telling everybody, I don't want you to tell the company story. I want to tell your story and your connection to the company, what you value about the business. So storytelling is really important. It needs to be concise, compelling, and consistent. So you need to practice storytelling. You need to tell the stories over and over again until you get them down. The fourth dot, which to me is the most critical part, which most people don't think about at all, is your strategic alliances. Who is it that sells to your target market, that doesn't compete with you, that by working together, you're better together than you are alone? So that's the fourth dot. And the fifth dot is managing all the relationships. So those are the 5 components, but it doesn't stop there. I have this model. It's like 5 dots in a circle. And then I broke the middle into 3 pieces of pie. And the first piece of pie is your existing client base, is that everything starts with a relationship and an existing client. If you're a brand new business, I think sales is more important than business development when you're a brand new business. I think business development comes in when you have an established business and you're trying to figure out how to streamline and grow the exact ideal client. I think when you start a business, you're looking to sell whoever can buy, and then eventually you figure out who your ideal client is through the process. And then you install a business development process to systematize what your ideal client looks like. But at the beginning, a lot of times what you think is your ideal client that does not become your ideal client. So building a business development process around a startup, I don't think is the right place. You need an established business to really implement a good business development process. So the first key piece in the middle is your existing clients, analyzing them. So I've been talking to existing clients from my company and other companies. I'm like, what is it that what's the story you tell about us versus not how we see it, but more through your eyes? And of those clients, which ones do we really like and which ones don't we like and which ones we would like to clone? And that helps us tell our target market story better. The second piece in the circle, in the inner part, is recruiting and developing talent. So if you have people on your team, then you need to recruit the right people. And then once you recruit them, you need to develop them. So if you take those 7 things, if you take relationship development, figure out your ideal target market, tell a compelling story, engage strategic partners that can get you back to your target client, manage all those relationships while understanding your existing client base, and recruit and develop talent, the byproduct of those 7 pieces is new business. New business falls out the bottom of the funnel versus new business being the thing you go look for. So I don't look for new business. I build a system. Relationship system. So we started a BD call, business development call, for one of the companies I'm working with. And we're looking at deals. I'm like, we should stop looking at deals as a business development team. If you want to have a sales call, have a sales call. But if we're gonna do business development, all of our time should be focused on those strategic partners. Are we clearly articulating our target market to them? And are we building the relationships with them? Because there's going to be, right now, we started with this one company. We built a list of 200 potential strategic partners in San Diego. So we've got a big list. And over the next 18 to 24 months, I believe that we'll end up with 20 strategic partners that will give us 95% of all of our new business. We just need to figure out which 20 are the 20 out of the 200. So that's a process. It just takes time. And it takes time investing in those relationships. If you don't invest in the relationships, nothing happens. And the beautiful part of building strategic partners is that you don't even always have to bring them clients. If you know, and so when I sit down with a strategic partner, my questions are, who's your ideal client? But then who's your best referral source? Who brings you the most clients? So if you introduce a prospective strategic partner to a new strategic partner for them that brings them buckets of people,
that's value.
Immense value. And that's where the opportunity, giving them one client at a time, nice. Enjoyable, helpful. But when you bring them key strategic partners, so lawyers get most of their business from other lawyers. Most people don't know that. They think all lawyers compete. No, lawyers are very specific in their niche. And the more you can help them find other lawyers that help them find their ideal target client. So I have one friend who does legal disputes with insurance policies. So if an insurance company denied claims for a company, that's their specialty. A lot of lawyers run into that, and they don't know many people that do that. So he needs to find other lawyers that run into the clients that have that problem, and they don't want to handle that. They hand it off to him.
The one key thing that I love about this, and I know that you mentioned that if you're a startup, obviously sales go to market quick and rapidly build up that base. But when you have that solid base, which, the majority of our listeners do, I think it's important that I always go back to this, talking to entrepreneurs, to peers, to clients, is that patience is the number one skill set when it comes to entrepreneurship, because this relationship, you can't automate this. You can't scale this by like the hundreds of thousands. This is a true one-to-one human connection. And I think I remember going to an event with Ryan Dice here in San Diego, and he mentioned that if you try to automate all of this, we're going to outcompete you, because we're going to form a better relationship with each one of our customers than you ever will. And it's just about being intentional, just being intentional in the front end. And I love the fact that it's a methodology that it's simple to follow. Obviously, it takes time and it takes relationship and effort, but I like that it's simple to follow. And if you follow these 5 processes in addition with the 3 pieces of the pie, you will get an output of new business, new clients, and growth.
I was doing a workshop with 10 of the team members that I'm working with this company, and I started talking to them, and I said, okay, so to me, a relationship, I have this thing called the communication continuum. So there's 4 levels of the continuum, and all relationships start with you. So if you don't understand yourself, really hard to be in a relationship, because everything affects you. And people that are affected by the outside world are not very good in relationship. People that take ownership for their own stuff and know what their own stuff is are very good in relationships. So everything starts with you. So we started the first 4 or 5 classes of this year-long program every 2 weeks for an hour at lunch. And it's all about who are you? So understanding self. So I asked the entire group to talk about their childhood and where they came from and parents and birth order and that type of stuff. And it opened up an amazing conversation with the members of the community. And it was incredibly powerful and touching, and some tears were shed. And I looked at all of them. I said, you could do this with your clients, can't you? And they all said, no, I can't do that. And yes, you can. So at Spire, which is the community that you talked about earlier, we created something called the Spire 33. And I have a list of 33 questions. Harvey McKay had the McKay 66. Joe Sweeney has the Sweeney 22. I'm like, I need a number so we created 33 questions that we want to know about every one of our members. And the questionnaire is broken into 4 parts. So one is their childhood. The second one is their career. The third one is their life. And the fourth part is their business, the business that they're in today. So it's just like, I know what I want to know about all the people that I'm connected to. The more we collect that information. So if we look at the 5 dots, relationships, understand self. So the communication continuum is you are the center of it. The second circle outside of you is one-to-one communications as a relationship. The circle outside of that is one to few, which is leadership team development. And the fourth circle is one to many. How do you communicate to your company when it goes past 10, 15 people? And then how do you market effectively to the community? That's the communication continuum. So you need to understand self first. But that's the piece around relationship. The target market, there's some great books. Selling to Zebras, Purple Cow, Blue Ocean Strategy, trying to figure out who is my ideal client. Lots of stuff on that. Not claiming to be an expert. Storytelling, lots of storytelling experts out there. Love the idea of telling consistent, concise stories. Strategic alliances, I don't think there's been enough written on that. And I'm creating an entire questionnaire, like I have Aspire 33, for talking to our strategic partners. Who's their ideal client? Who's their ideal referral source? What is, how many new clients are they looking for per month? I mean, I want to know what's important to them so I can help get them what they want. But the relationship management piece, I talk about something called a Warm 250 that was introduced to me from some friends that worked at the Yellow Pages many, many years ago. And part of the Yellow Pages training program was called a Warm 250. Who are the 250 people you're going to touch on a regular basis? And that regular basis was 30, 60, 90. Some are going to be on a 30-day cycle, some are going to be on 60-day cycles, and some are going to be on 90-day cycles. When you start gathering more information about people, and when you start collecting birthdays, anniversaries, you start sending out information to them, excuse me, that's important to them, not important to you, then you're not prospecting them.
You're not marketing, yeah.
You're not marketing to them. You're building a relationship. Happy birthday. So my reminder comes up and says, did you talk to this person in the last 30 days, 60 days, whatever my cycle is for that person? And it's like, yeah, I already talked to them. I don't need to do anything because it came in the natural course of doing business. But if I didn't, I go look at the profile and figure out, okay, what's coming up? Well, Thanksgiving's coming up. I'll just wait until Thanksgiving. I'll send them a note saying happy Thanksgiving. So it's not like, hey, I'm just calling you to ask for business. No, I'm being conscious about your life. And I love this concept. There's this guy, Jason Gaynord, who runs an organization out of Toronto. And he uses this term called uncommon commonalities. And he has this podcast called Community Made, which I think is brilliant. And I've really enjoyed listening to him. I did it right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was listening to him a lot. And it's all about these uncommon commonalities. How do you connect people? So we just did a workshop the other day. What is your superpower? For whatever reason, and I stopped asking why, I get names in my head. When I sit with somebody like you, names float through my head. I'm like, oh, Raul needs to meet this person and this person. There's some people I really think you'd enjoy meeting. And I'm not sure why sometimes those names pop into my head, but I act on them.
Yep.
I make virtual introductions, connecting dots. My title is Chief Connector. That's what I do. That's how I'm known in the community here. And that's part of my identity now, but I'm not attached to it like I used to be with my company was called For Profit. I didn't know what I was without the business. I didn't know what I was without being on stage talking about the books I'd written and all that other stuff. And I had to redefine, who is this being?
Mm-hmm.
Who is Larry? And that's what we started this conversation with, is who are we? And in our culture right now, we're doings. We're human doings versus human beings.
100%.
And we're struggling with winning, accomplishing, getting to the top of the mountain. I was just listening to Ready Player 2, this book, and Ready Player 1. It's not about, at the end of Ready Player 1, in order to win, he didn't have to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about winning. It was about getting to a certain place in the game and just finding peace. So what is it that brings us joy? It's different for everybody. But I've been biking and playing tennis. I've been having so much fun during this pandemic. I feel guilty in some ways because I know so many people are in pain, and I have tons of empathy. Well, my wife would say I have no empathy, but I feel like I understand that there's lots of people going through some challenging times now.
It's not easy.
But I'm not one of them. Either I've chosen not to, or when the pandemic started, I lost 20 pounds within the first 45 days. I've been exercising like crazy. It's giving me a lot of time in the morning that I never had before because I'd rush off to the office. Now that I don't have to do that, I was back at my house by 8:15 this morning after doing a 30-mile, 2-hour bike ride up some hills and got a great workout, probably burns 1,500 to 2,000 calories. Now I can eat whatever I want all day and not feel guilty. And I'm still 20 pounds less than I was when the pandemic started. It's been fun.
It all starts with you, and I want to bring it back to that, where it starts with you and how you view yourself in the business, but also how you view relationships, and also how you view the relationships with your clientele, with your existing partners, or those partners that you need to build a relationship with. And it's not spammy. It's not being in front of their face all the time. It's how do I naturally build a real human relationship? And I know we're in a virtual world right now. And as you know, one of the things that I'm seeing, and I made a joke about it, that after the pandemic, we're going to have a lot of post-pandemic parties. We're going to have a lot of gatherings and a lot of like getting back to our core need as human beings to connect with each other. And I know between now and then, hopefully it's sooner rather than later, being able to build true, authentic relationships right now, even if it is virtual, just like camera or over audio, just like this. Most important, start with you, build a good relationship with yourself, those around you and your immediate family, then focusing on external with business relationships. And I think from there, that momentum, like you talked about, Larry, step after step, bridging the gap, bridging the 5 little dots. And then from there, I think we'll start seeing more traction. So I love everything that you mentioned here, Larry.
The virtual world is not any different. I was on a call 2 weeks ago with one of the team members, leadership team members of this outsourced accounting firm. And we were talking to a prospect. And 20 minutes went by, and I could sense that the gentleman on the other end of the phone was getting a little anxious about, we should be getting into business by now. And then he started to break in and start talking. And I asked one last question of the prospect. I said, so what difference does your business make in the community? And is that something that's important to you? And we spent the next 30 minutes talking about their why and why they do what they do and what they want long term. That was worth more than any conversation we could have had about how we do our business, how good we are. The questions we ask will far outperform the information that we deliver. So stop trying to be so smart. I mean, the reason I can say this to people is because I do this. I catch myself every day saying, Larry, shut up. I know that I'm in the middle of a conversation, and what I'm saying is so important to me. And sometimes the person I'm talking to is incredibly engaged, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, I don't learn when I'm speaking. I learn when I'm listening. And that's the opportunity that we have. And we are not good at that culturally. That's not our way of being. So I've learned, this is all learned behavior. This is not how I was raised. This is not how I was mentored through GE and through my own entrepreneurial journey. And I always felt different. I felt like a misfit. And I always felt like I didn't fit in. And I think most people do. But I realize now that a lot of it is because I didn't agree. I was born and raised just outside of New York City. From 29 to 48, I lived in New York City and the Bronx. And my dad was like, why don't you just go to Wall Street? I mean, you could make I'm like, I can't imagine that life, because that wasn't for me. And I had a lot of people around me that were. And I left New York for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons I left New York is it was 7 to 7 every day was business and business only. And I had a client here that I was coaching that I said, how much of your 30-minute meeting do you dedicate to building a relationship with the person on the other side of the table? He said, 0. He said, I'm all business. I'm there for business. I'm like, great. Can you do me a favor? He's like, what? I said, just give me 10% of that time. Give me 3 minutes of your 30 minutes.
And build a relationship.
And build a relationship. He says, what am I going to talk about? I said, what do you like? I said, what are you passionate about? We got him down to 3 things. He was passionate about travel, passionate about his family, and he loved the stock market. I'm like, great. Let's come up with 3 questions on each one. Start with travel, move to family, and then finance. And if the person on the other side of the table is triggered by any one of those topics, learn more about what their fascination is with their family, what their fascination is with travel, whatever it is. Just learn something about them other than how to solve their business problem, and your world will get better. He didn't want to hear it. And he's not abnormal. He's not wrong. He just sees the world differently than I see the world. So sometimes I'm not trying to make people.
Yeah, sometimes you want a really complex answer, like really sophisticated, tough strategy, when the simplest answers produce the best results.
Questions produce the best results. Learn to ask better questions, because usually when somebody gives you a problem, it's usually not the problem. There's a great book called The QBQ by John Miller, Question Behind the Question. And the Socratic method of any problem solving is don't deal with the surface issue, figure out what's really going on.
More questions up. Yep. I love that. Larry, for all of our listeners here today, where's the best place for people go to say thank you and also reach out to you?
SpireSD.com is the community here in San Diego. And you asked earlier about when the pandemic hit, everybody was like, well, now Spire can go outside of San Diego. I'm like, great, it can. I don't want it to. There's something about community that's very local for me. You asked at the beginning. I believe that's very important. And I'm not looking at this as a pandemic only business. So once the pandemic's over and we're to the next phase of whatever life is going to look like, local San Diego is still going to be incredibly important. And I want to come through this pandemic as the strongest organization in San Diego for people that care about making a difference. I'm very clear about that. Could I have found other people in LA and San Francisco and New York that wanted to make a difference and live the Spire values? Sure. Could I have made some immediate money from it in that time and redesign the business to be a virtual business? Sure. I didn't want to do that. It wasn't my intention. So if they want to get in touch with us, spiresd.com is the domain. Larry@spiresd.com is the email address. Happy to talk to anybody. You can find my LinkedIn profile. It's just Larry Kesslin, Kesslin. I'm very easy to get in touch with, and I make time. For me, I see everybody so busy. I'm not as busy as most people. I'm into efficiency. I'd rather find relationships that can get me 20 clients than try and go find 20 clients. So I spend all my time trying to find strategic partners for everything I do.
I love that. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well. Larry, thank you so much for being on, man.
Pleasure. Enjoy. Stay healthy. Smile a lot. Enjoy your day. Enjoy the holidays. And thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your show.
I appreciate you, man.